campaign against the Maduro regime in Venezuela reaches a new high.
Caribbean Sea, 1446 local time, a /SPY-1A detected 2 fast inbound contacts without identification, both split and accelerated into attack geometry. The signals gave no identification, no reply. Within seconds, they split, accelerating into attack formation. The calm dissolved. Red lights flared as the ship shifted to Condition 2. Steel doors slammed, alarms wailed, and every deck trembled with motion. Inside the Combat Information Center, the air turned sharp with electricity. Voices clipped, screens pulsing, every eye locked on the radar. Then the confirmation hit. 2 Venezuelan F-16A Block 15 descending fast. A radar lock spiked across the display, and twin sidewinders tore from the horizon, blazing white through the afternoon sky. Alarms wailed, the hull trembled, and the horizon flared white and orange. But when Venezuelan jets strike first in broad daylight, how far will America strike back? Like and subscribe to Military Power, because you will never know what happens next. The order was carried out, and within seconds the destroyer shifted from tense readiness to full engagement. And the USS Jason Dunham had entered what the Navy defines as a weapons-free environment, a condition where human instinct yields to automated precision and every system acts in coordinated survival. Across the ship, engines surged and sensors synchronized. On the radar screens, 2 Sidewinder missiles streaked across the bright Caribbean sky, fired moments earlier by Venezuelan F-16s, closing in at supersonic speed. The first missile veered off course almost immediately, trapped in a storm of electronic interference. The ship's decoy systems saturated the air with false targets, confusing the seeker head until its infrared lock failed. The projectile spun away, vanishing into the ocean in a burst of spray and fire. The second missile continued straight, carving a sharp white path through the sunlight as it closed on the destroyer's bow. The Aegis system responded faster than any human reflex. From the forward tubes, a dense wall of chaff erupted skyward, and the close-in weapon system roared to life with a metallic scream. Its 6 rotating barrels spun faster than the eye could track, unleashing a continuous storm of tungsten through the glare. The missile disintegrated in a flash of molten debris that scattered across the waves. The 2 F-16s broke formation instantly. On radar, their traces split. One jet climbed high into the clouds, while the other skimmed so low its exhaust shimmered across the water's surface. It was a deliberate cross-kill tactic, meant to divide the destroyer's tracking systems and force simultaneous engagement at 2 levels. The sunlight reflected off the sea, turning the horizon into a mirror of heat and distortion. From the bridge to the radar room, every sailor recognized the danger. The higher jet could dive with gravity's advantage, while the lower one could vanish in the radar clutter until the final second. Inside the Combat Information Center, the air vibrated with focused energy. The low hum of consoles blended with the deep tremor of engines as technicians filtered through static and bursts of jamming. Each pulse from the SPY-1A radar refreshed the battlespace hundreds of times per second. A faint thermal bloom from the low-flying F-16's engines appeared, a fleeting spike amid the glare of the sunlit sea, and the computer began predicting its attack arc. On deck, the CIWS turret rotated with mechanical precision, sensors sweeping for the moment the jet would break through the haze. The sun beat down, blinding the horizon. Sailors braced against the vibration running through the steel deck plates. The air smelled of fuel and heated metal, filled with the pulse of machinery and the tension of waiting. The higher F-16 curved out of its climb, aligning for a steep dive. At the same time, the low-flying jet swung around the stern, using the destroyer's own wake to mask its radar signature. The Aegis system recalculated both trajectories and assigned separate fire channels. From the vertical launch cells, an SM-2 missile burst free, trailing a white coil of smoke that glimmered like silver in the sunlight. A faint flash appeared above the cloud line, followed by a deep concussion that rolled across the open sea. Fragments of metal rained down, catching the light before disappearing into the waves. The first F-16 was gone. Intercept occurred at 9 nautical miles. Debris field observed, no secondary threats on scope. The second jet remained, diving low with its cannon armed. Streams of 20mm tracer rounds tore across the water, hammering the destroyer's starboard rail and throwing sparks across the deck. The crew did not break formation. They trusted the system, the precision of machinery over the fallibility of reaction. The CIWS pivoted again, locking onto the incoming jet. The gun fired in a relentless surge, a blinding wall of tungsten ripping through the air. The thunder rolled across the sea, drowning every other sound. Within seconds, the F-16 tried to climb, but its tail disintegrated under the barrage. A fireball erupted in the blue sky, scattering fragments that fell like burning ribbons into the sea. From the first radar lock to the final explosion, the battle lasted barely 12 seconds. Then, silence reclaimed the horizon. The radar sweep returned to a steady pulse, clear, unbroken, free of hostile signatures. Sunlight glimmered on the waves littered with drifting debris. The only sounds were the rhythm of water against steel and the faint tick of cooling metal. Below deck, sailors moved through red-lit corridors. Fire control teams checked bulkheads for damage, while others swept up charred fragments from ventilation grills. The air smelled of ozone and scorched paint. On the upper deck, spent shell casings rolled lazily under the heat, reflecting the afternoon sun. The sudden stillness felt unreal. Moments earlier, the destroyer had been at the heart of supersonic combat. Now it drifted through calm and brightness. On the horizon, faint smoke marked the spot where wreckage still burned. A few officers paused at the rail, staring at the fading plumes, aware that the scene before them might one day shape the course of nations. In the radar room, technicians completed their sweep. The display turned green, confirming no remaining threats. The entry was logged, time-stamped, and sent to Fleet Command. The systems kept scanning, but the Caribbean had returned to stillness. The aftermath unfolded slowly, like a breath released after strain. The CIWS barrels glowed faintly orange as they cooled. Engineers recorded temperatures, logged data, and reset firing cycles. Sailors wiped soot from their faces, exchanging quiet looks of fatigue rather than victory. 12 seconds had defined the line between peace and catastrophe. Under the daylight, the aftermath appeared almost too vivid. Oil shimmered across the water, fragments of aluminum gleamed like mirrors, and thin smoke curled upward through the flawless blue. The perfection of the sky made the destruction below seem unreal. The crew returned to their routines, movements mechanical but steady. Beneath that rhythm lay the unspoken truth. They had witnessed a moment that could shift the balance of power. 2 aircraft destroyed in open skies. A brief exchange that would echo far beyond the Caribbean. By late afternoon, the fires had died out. Only thin wisps of smoke curled toward the horizon as the sea regained its mirror calm. Yet the silence felt heavier than before. Not peace, but aftermath. The pause between survival and consequence. As reports moved toward Washington and Caracas, a new kind of battle began, one of perception and politics. But for now, the Caribbean remained still, holding the wreckage and the reminder that in 12 seconds of precision, America had defended peace and shown how fragile it truly was. By 1510 local time, the sea had already swallowed the last trace of flame. What remained of the 2 Venezuelan fighters floated as small, bright fragments drifting across the sunlit swells. The battle had ended, but the mission continued. The USS Jason Dunham maintained her silent watch, engines humming in steady rhythm, radar arrays sweeping a horizon now stripped of movement. The Caribbean shimmered under the heat, carrying with it the sharp scent of hot metal, jet fuel, and salt. What the crew felt was not triumph, but gravity. The realization that the line between defense and war had narrowed to almost nothing. Rescue operations began without fanfare. RHIB boats dropped into the water, their engines humming as they moved toward the last recorded coordinates of the debris field. Under the harsh sunlight, search teams used optical sensors and handheld scanners to comb the glittering surface. The afternoon air was heavy, shimmering with heat rising off the waves. They recovered scattered fragments, a broken stabilizer, torn fuselage panels, and a single ejection seat drifting among the ripples. The parachute cords floated lifelessly behind it. No beacons were detected, and all data confirmed the site lay 12.4 nautical miles outside territorial waters. From the bridge, officers watched the live feed through stabilized cameras. Each passing minute stretched longer under the heat. The ocean felt indifferent, its wide glare hiding what it had taken. When the RHIBS returned, the findings were logged and transmitted to U.S. Southern Command. Inside the operations center, the air was dense with focus. Every radar log was reviewed, every voice transmission replayed, every system check confirmed in sequence. The crew knew this data would soon travel beyond the ship, to analysts, diplomats, and strategists who would dissect each frame and signal. For those aboard, the meaning was far simpler. The system had worked, and they had survived by precision. In the technical compartments, maintenance teams moved methodically through checklists. A few fragments had scarred the outer railings. One communication antenna showed signs of heat stress, but the hull remained intact. Fire control reloaded ammunition, sealed the CIWS mount, and cleared ventilation channels. In the medical bay, 2 sailors were treated for mild concussions from shockwaves. Both were cleared back to duty within the hour. The rest of the crew adjusted to the sudden quiet. The ship's alert level lowered 1 step, from full combat readiness to general patrol. Emergency lights dimmed, replaced by the steady glow of control panels. The constant vibration of machinery replaced the echoes of impact, yet the silence carried a new weight. The cost of what it meant to survive an attack. There were no cheers, no relief, only reflection. Above deck, the wind shifted again, carrying the last curls of smoke westward. The sky burned bright, the sunlight reflecting sharply off the metal deck. The sea below was calm, disturbed only by the faint wake of the returning RHIBS. The commanding officer stood near the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon where the faint haze of wreckage still marked the distance. It was an ordinary view, blue sea, white light, and yet it no longer felt innocent. The bridge logged the final post-engagement report. No secondary contacts detected, no new transmissions intercepted. The operational zone was secure. To anyone watching from afar, the Jason Dunham appeared unchanged, a gray silhouette slicing through calm water, steady and professional. But for those aboard, the ocean had shifted meaning. Every echo on the radar, every sparkle of light off a wave now carried uncertainty. They had seen how quickly peace could collapse, how in 12 seconds calm could become fire. Hours passed. By late afternoon, the official after-action documentation was underway. The radar logs confirmed every timestamp. The telemetry matched satellite tracking, and the geolocation data proved the engagement had occurred entirely outside Venezuelan territory. The Navy would label it a lawful act of defense. Caracas inevitably would call it aggression. The truth, however, remained somewhere beneath the waves, buried with the wreckage. For the sailors, that argument was distant noise. On board, routine had already reclaimed its rhythm. Engineers monitored propulsion flow, navigators plotted the next patrol grid, radar operators tested new scan calibrations. Life aboard continued, disciplined and quiet. They knew what they had done was necessary, measured, controlled, and exact. In its own way, that precision was victory enough. By early evening, the Caribbean appeared untouched. The heat softened, the sea turned silver under the slanting light, and the horizon blurred into pale haze. From above, there was nothing left to see. No smoke, no floating debris, no hint of the chaos that had unfolded hours earlier. Yet on the deck, the faint smell of fuel and ozone lingered like memory. As the shift changed and reports streamed toward Washington, the commanding officer returned to the deck once more. The sun hung low, throwing a golden reflection across the calm surface. He looked toward the marked coordinates, 12.4 nautical miles from any shore, where the sea now kept its silence. What he saw was neither victory nor tragedy, but inevitability. A confrontation averted only by seconds and steadiness. The Jason Dunham maintained her course, steady and deliberate. From afar, she looked like any other ship at sea. But within her steel hull, every sailor carried the same quiet awareness that defense, when witnessed from distance, can look almost indistinguishable from war. If this had been your crew, how would you describe it? As victory or as restraint? In Washington, the response was immediate but measured. The Pentagon released radar imagery, encrypted communication logs, and GPS coordinates showing that the engagement had occurred 12.4 nautical miles outside any territorial boundary. Analysts reconstructed the flight data, confirming that both Venezuelan F-16 had locked radar first and fired before the destroyer returned fire. The evidence was presented publicly as a demonstration of precision and legality, not escalation. For the administration, it was vital to frame the event as deterrence in action, controlled, defensive, and within the rules of engagement. Behind that composed language, readiness deepened. 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers were redeployed across the eastern Caribbean, establishing a wide surveillance arc to secure commercial lanes. A P-8A Poseidon and an RQ-4 Global Hawk began continuous orbits over the region, monitoring emissions along the Venezuelan coastline. Data streamed back to Southern Command and the National Reconnaissance Office, where analysts cross-checked new radar activity against known defense grids. The operational message remained understated, yet unmistakable. Deterrence through presence, not provocation. Markets reacted before diplomats could. By market close, crude rose roughly 8%. Insurers raised premiums, and multiple tankers rerouted to southern lanes. By evening, logistics firms had already redrawn transit maps. Screens in Houston, Rotterdam, and Singapore displayed the same image of burning wreckage on open water. Proof that a 12-second battle in the Caribbean could shake the rhythm of global commerce. Across the hemisphere, governments moved carefully. Colombia urged calm, but defended the right of all nations to operate freely in international waters. Brazil called for mediation through regional blocs. In Europe, quiet confirmations arrived through back channels. Allied intelligence verified the U.S. data, confirming that the Venezuelan aircraft had indeed fired first. Within Caracas, however, reports of confusion spread through the chain of command. Some military sources described the attack as unauthorized, others hinted at external involvement. Either way, uncertainty had returned to a region that had enjoyed relative calm for years. Onboard Jason Dunham, the ship settled back into its routine, though the mood had changed. The crew resumed inspections and sensor recalibrations, yet each radar contact now carried political weight. Orders from Fleet Command emphasized restraint and detailed reporting. Every detection logged, every maneuver verified. Even when the sea appeared calm, its quiet now felt strategic. The sailors knew their ship's presence alone spoke louder than any statement. By early evening, intelligence briefings reached the National Security Council. Analysts outlined the risk of misinterpretation, warning that Venezuela could stage symbolic flyovers or naval drills to save face. The Navy elevated readiness to Condition Bravo, a stance of heightened alert designed to deter further aggression without escalating tensions. To the untrained eye, the task force looked like a standard patrol. In reality, it was a deliberate posture of measured power. Economists soon began redefining the event not as an isolated skirmish, but as a geopolitical correction. The Caribbean, once a quiet artery for trade and energy, was once again a strategic theater. NATO requested additional maritime intelligence. Several Latin American states discreetly increased coastal surveillance. A 12-second exchange of fire had prompted half the hemisphere to rethink its balance of deterrence. Aboard Jason Dunham, time slowed into disciplined routine. Engineers logged maintenance checks, radar teams cycled diagnostics, and officers compiled the engagement timeline for Washington. Each entry was factual and exact, stripped of emotion. The crew knew that analysts and policymakers would later debate those 12 seconds for months, but for them, it was already history. Their job had been to respond. Their success was in restraint. As daylight began to fade, the political and economic ripples spread outward. News anchors debated whether the incident signaled a return to Cold War-style brinkmanship or simply reinforced the logic of deterrence. Policy institutes modeled escalation scenarios. Oil analysts tracked production shifts across the Gulf. What had unfolded in one brief encounter at sea was already shaping new patterns of global alignment. By sunset, the Caribbean had returned to deceptive calm. The sea's surface glowed gold under the fading light, erasing all visible trace of combat. Yet beneath that stillness, consequences moved quietly. In Washington, the Department of Defense circulated updated engagement protocols, and Fleet Command drafted coordination notes for upcoming United Nations discussions. The machinery of policy was already in motion. The evening ended with a view of serenity. A horizon painted in amber and blue, a destroyer gliding through reflective water. But appearances no longer equaled peace. Beneath that horizon, the unseen lines of deterrence and diplomacy had shifted, redrawn not by speeches or negotiations, but by 12 seconds of disciplined precision that had reminded the world how fragile stability truly is. Caribbean Sea. Days after the incident, routine patrols resumed as the region began to calm. The Caribbean stretched calm and blue, a mirror of sky so perfect it almost erased the memory of violence beneath it. The USS Jason Dunham resumed her patrol along established routes, moving with the same measured rhythm that had carried her through thousands of nautical miles before. To distant eyes, nothing appeared different. Yet, within the command deck, every mark on the navigation chart now carried quiet weight. One red circle remained, the coordinate 12.4 nautical miles offshore, where order had been tested and held by seconds. Inside the operations center, daily reports continued to stream toward higher command. The atmosphere was subdued, but steady. The sharp tension that had once filled the corridors had settled into calm discipline, the kind that follows survival. Technical officers ran system diagnostics, verified missile readiness, and logged maintenance cycles. It was all routine work, but beneath each entry lay a shared understanding. It had not been aggression that preserved them, but control. On the weather deck, the traces of combat had vanished. Railings shone with fresh paint. The CIWS mount stood silent and cool under the sunlight, and the sea breeze carried no scent of smoke. Above them, the American flag moved slowly in the soft wind. It was not raised in triumph, but in quiet steadiness, a symbol of strength contained within order. Sailors paused occasionally to look out across the horizon, not with pride alone, but with reflection. What had taken place was more than a display of technology or precision. It had been a test of judgment, a moment when restraint proved as powerful as firepower. Each decision made aboard that destroyer had balanced danger against duty, and each missile launched had carried the potential to ignite far more than a brief clash. Yet what followed showed the difference between dominance and destruction. America's strength lay not only in the ability to strike, but in the discipline to stop. Far beyond sight, in Washington and across the world, analysts and diplomats still debated the meaning of those 12 seconds. They parsed data, drafted policies, and argued over deterrence. For the men and women of Jason Dunham, that conversation belonged elsewhere. Their task remained the same: to keep watch, to maintain readiness, and to ensure that deterrence never turned into open war. They knew the ocean they guarded was never truly still. Beneath its glass surface flowed the hidden currents of power that kept nations in balance. As the sun climbed higher, the destroyer turned northward, her wake drawing a silver thread across the open water. The horizon widened ahead, the air clear, the sea endless. Above the mast, the flag held steady, unshaken, enduring, quietly resolute. The sea is calm again, and the flag still flies. It is more than victory. It is a reminder that America's strength is what keeps the world standing free. See you next time.